to GenFriends. I'm your host, Cheri Hudson Passey from Carolina Girl Genealogy. And I am so lucky every week to have this great panel that comes and we just get to chat and talk genealogy for a while. We've got Melissa Barker, the archive lady. Hi, Melissa.
Hello, everybody. It's great to have Cheri with us every week, too.
Thank you. Dan Earl, our family history guy, is here.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Dan. And last but not least, of course, is Laura Hedgecock, treasure chest of memories. Hi, Laura.
Hey, everyone.
Well, we are still covering Finding Your Roots. And there was a wonderful, this last episode that we're going to talk about. It was called Fighters, and it was Tony Danza. And it was, oh gosh, what's his name? It just went Tony Crews. It just went out of my head.
Terry Crews. Yeah.
Terry Crews. Sorry, Terry.
Yep.
Tony Danza, Terry Crews. Got it. Okay. So they called it Fighters, I guess, because they were both athletes first, and then they went into acting, but their families, had to really fight to get here. So they have to, guys, I hate to tell you this, but they keep putting silly stuff in the chat, and so it makes us all laugh. Anyhow, so you should see the behind the scenes.
Yes.
See it. You don't want to see it. Anyway, so we're going to talk about that episode. I was saying that instead of Fighters, they should have called it something like Don't Believe Family Stories, because both of them discovered that the things that they thought all their lives were not true, so
but as genealogists, don't we all come across that?
Absolutely. Flat out lies sometimes, huh, Laura?
Yes.
Flat out lies sometimes.
Yes.
from our family. And a lot of times it's just because people don't pass down the stories, and we hear little bits, and so we keep that in our head. I mean, my grandmother used to tell me that her grandfather, who served in the Civil War, when he came home, he was the one that got to ring the bell to tell everybody that the war was over. I have never been able to find that in a record or document or anything anywhere, but she really believed it. So I was going to start with Tony Danza, because he said that the foundation of his memories of his family is that they came over in 1917, and he was Italian, and that's when his family got there, and he found out that he had several lives that were here before then, and the shock on his face, he was amazed.
That's why it's important to look for the records. I mean, that we all talked in the green room actually about the lack of records, but we're not going to go there. But as genealogists, it's all about the records. You cannot have too many records. You can't search. You can't stop searching for more records.
Exactly.
Because the more you find, I think the more story it tells, because when you look at some records and it tells you a story, but it may not tell the whole story, and you may not know that there's more to the story.
Right.
So that's why I think it's important for genealogists to continually look for records.
Laura, you had a
comment.
Sorry, she had her hand up. She actually put her hand up.
Okay,
She actually put her hand up.
She was using her reactions. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, and to Melissa's point too, I think it does us good to look at the context of that group of people and the push and pull factors. I was helping my girlfriend try to trace her ancestors in Sicily, and I found this. She had no idea that they had come back and forth, but apparently that's not unusual. That there were some groups that immigrated and they stayed. But there were other groups, they didn't want to give up their homeland.
Right.
But they had to find, so it probably just depends on how bad the push factors were, what life was like. So
I agree. I think he said it was something like 70% went back at one time. And then
that was a high number.
That was
a very high number. So So go ahead, Dan, what were you going to say?
Yeah, well, just to what everybody's been talking about, like sometimes when we look at records or hints of records on certain websites, and we try to immediately discount it because it doesn't fit our own narrative or what we know. This is a good reminder to go back and look at those things, even though we go, well, that can't be my record because my people came in 1917, not 1902.
Exactly.
But that could be the changing your story about what's going on, and not be so cemented into the story that we've we've created to be open to looking for more records for that person.
Yeah. And you know, the historical context and the social context that they put in, who knew? I didn't, but I don't do Italian research either, or research in New Orleans. Who knew that all those people from Sicily back in the early 1900s immigrated and went to New Orleans? Really? I mean, who would have? I had never heard of that in my entire life, you know, but it's like they said things were so bad in Italy that they came because the newspaper articles were telling them to come because they would get work better than the African Americans, the newly freedmen, since emancipation had happened with the Civil War, that they would get the jobs because they worked harder. I'm like, oh, but anyway, so, but yeah, they were saying, really, they're going to take those jobs. It must have been just terrible, you know, must have been just terrible. And then they didn't stay very long and they went right back. And so,
and then at one point, Dr. Gates even made the comment about they went back to Italy and they remembered why they left.
They remembered why they left and they came back again.
That it was poverty. So, you know.
Right. And you think to yourself, how did they keep affording to go back and forth? I mean,
so that's what I do. It seems to me that most immigrants, it took every single, I mean, you hear stories that they showed up, but they had 5 cents in their pocket, you know, when they got here. So how did they go back and forth like that?
Yeah, I would have liked to have known that.
I did, when it came to New Orleans, I did read something recently that, because New Orleans was sending ships full of cotton and fabric and stuff to Europe. And they were empty coming back.
Oh,
and so it was cheap passage compared to
well, that would make
ports.
sense.
That does make sense, right? And so that just shows that whole, you know, historical, that what was going on at that time. If we've got questions about why would they have done this, is to look at the history of the place, see what was going on. So I would have liked to have seen some of those ship manifests that they were showing. They would say we got it, and then they would never show it. And I'm like,
they showed the one for Tony Danza's. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're right.
So that was a little frustrating, is to not see the documents, because we like to see the documents. And for everybody that's always interested to see what else Mary found, she's not feeling well tonight. So we were hoping that she would come and tell us, I found them, and show them to us. But she's not feeling very well tonight, so she couldn't join us. But did you love the story about his grandfather and his grandfather's brother and the saloon?
And that was also a great piece of American history.
Yeah.
You know, that they shared with, like you just talked about, social history, you know, just American history in whatever place your ancestors lived.
Yeah.
Because if you have ancestors from that area, then it's something to think about. If they lived during that time, if they owned a saloon, or if they had a hotel. Well, was it a real hotel? Or
it was a real hotel. It was a fake hotel, so they could sell liquor and the little, you know, women of the night.
I pulled her up out of a trap door thing. I thought, wow.
He was so shocked. That was so cute, because he says, my dad was just so anti alcohol, and you know.
Well, you know, and I thought about that. I thought that's probably why.
Yeah, it could be
because of seeing that. And so,
yeah. Laura.
So, see, I'm being a good girl tonight.
You are.
You're being such a good girl.
So I wonder so a lot of the previous, I mean, even as late as the 60s and 70s, so many topics were considered shameful. And I wonder if it'll be different now, because our current times, our generation, are like, we love these stories. Their character, that's hilarious. That was a trap door. I mean, it's not like, oh my gosh. It's like, whoa. So I wonder if that's good for the passing down of stories, et cetera, that we don't have that.
Sure.
I hope so.
I just think.
Yeah.
And another thing to think about that too was the whole reason they did that. And as Judy Russell always tells us, you look at the laws. They had passed a law in what, they said like 96 or 80, it was in the late 1800s. And if you couldn't sell alcohol on Sundays.
On Sundays.
Unless it was a hotel. Was that right? Or something?
A hotel with 10 or more rooms.
So they make tiny rooms.
Yes.
Like we have a cat hotel, so we can sell alcohol to humans.
There you go. Well, they
so
said it was devastating for the merchants or for the people that, the saloon owners. And you can
Right.
imagine that there are probably a lot of saloon owners. I mean, not like, in my little town here that was been dry up and just till a couple of years ago, I mean, you're talking New York. And so they
yeah.
had a lot of
Yeah.
saloons. And so that would have been especially they said, which is another thing I picked up on, Sunday was the only day that workers had off.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You
they
think about
work
now, we
Saturdays.
have the weekend.
Yeah.
Some people work Saturdays, but for the most
yeah.
part, it's just an understood thing. You're
Right,
off on
yeah.
the weekend. Back then, they
Exactly.
worked Monday through
weren't.
Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People were ingenious, when they needed to make money and they needed
They
could work. They
Make
would
trap
work.
doors to hide hookers.
That's
It was
right.
it was
That's
ingenious.
right.
It was clever times back then.
Clever times back then. You had to do what you had to do, right?
That's
That was,
right.
I thought that was
Make
a
that
great
passage so you could go back and forth.
Right.
That was good, Melissa. I love that. I love that. I was let's see what else happened with Tony Danza. I'm trying to think what other stories that he had. I mean, he had like maternal and paternal ancestors here in the United States long before he ever. Oh, and also he found out that his grandfather had been married before.
Yes.
Yeah,
Josephine.
And that she died, and then
Well, we don't know what happened.
she was gone, we should say.
Right. There's
Yes.
lots of ways for wives to be gone that don't include death, right? And so I think that was an assumption, or they should have shown us the death record.
They should.
Yeah, if they had that information, 'cause Dr. Gates did say something about her dying, and I thought, well, okay, where's the record? But they never showed it. So either they knew and they just didn't show it, or what?
Or the editor cut it.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
or something like that. And so then he married his grandmother, and so he never even knew that story. He had
He
no clue that and here's the thing, she came over and her sponsor was his uncle that ran the saloon, because her aunt married his
Right.
it sounded, at first I was like, wait a minute, whoa,
Yeah. I was doing the genealogy math on that one too.
I
was
was
like,
too.
hello.
Until he explained, no. He, as the man, was sponsoring her, but she was related to his wife. So, yeah, that got me too. I was like, so was that allowed at that time period? I don't know. So I thought there's so many revelations that they gave him, and he was so excited about everything and so emotional at the end. He just was crying and just saying, I've got a history that I didn't know about before. He knew little bits, but now, go ahead.
No. And so he got really emotional when Dr. Gates told him about I can't remember which ancestor it was, his great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, had come over here and he got a job as a tinner.
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 Yes.
And that's another thing about, we should always try to learn our ancestors' occupations, because when you learn what they had to do, a lot of times it really affects how you look at them. But a tinner was someone who worked in a place where they took sheets of tin and they passed it through acid and molten some sort of metal or something, I don't know. And got very low wages, of course. And so that really affected him I think it really hit him to know that what his ancestors sacrificed so that he could be here.
Right.
Absolutely. And so he got really choked up with that. And he said, our ancestors went through a lot for us. And then he also, which I loved this comment, he said, everybody should do this, meaning everybody should do their ancestry and know their ancestors.
Yes, absolutely. Because it gives you some grounding. It really does. Even if you find some things out, maybe you didn't really want to find out, it still gives you some grounding, helps you know who you are, where people came from, so that you're here, and all those stories. And then a lot of times you see things in yourself that they were doing, or they liked, or they, things like that. And so I think that's really interesting too, when we find things that are kind of passed down in the DNA like that. So he was really emotional, and I was watching it and I'm tearing up. My husband's like, what's wrong with you? I'm watching Finding Your Roots. And it's just one of those shows, one of those episodes where it's making me. So I thought his story was really great. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to say about no, he did say that he had gone to Sicily at one point, and he said he went and everybody was so proud of him. And he was just like, but they've made me proud. I mean, you could tell that he was like, wait a second, they're proud of me, but look at everything they did, you know, to get me here, you know, so I'm here.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so
And when you dig into your genealogy
Mhm.
to the point that you're finding these records and these stories and things, it does give you a sense of what your ancestors went through.
right.
Not necessarily for you, because you know, you don't know if they're
Oh,
they're
no.
thinking ahead
No.
to their
Yeah.
descendants,
They're just trying to
but
stay
I
alive and
mean
eat.
that they persevered, that I know that they survived, you know,
Yeah.
and so and we are here because of that. So
Exactly. You know, I'm wondering if one of the reasons why he thought the 1917 date is because his mother was born in Italy, but her parents had been here before and then gone back. And so I'm wondering if that's kind of where that story, because really, you don't think too much about them coming and then going back. And so I can see where that may have come from. But he also found out, I don't know if he knew this because they didn't really talk to him about that his name is Danza, but that's not what it was. It was like is it Danza or in Danza, something like that.
Danza.
Danza. Yeah. So that he found that.
And I wonder though, Cheri, when we talk about when people pass down, like when did you come? I wonder, you know, if they kind of think, well, the time that I came where I meant to stay was 1917.
Yeah, that could be.
So it's just a miscommunication kind of thing, and not I'm hiding or.
Yeah, because, you know, there's so much he didn't know. He had no idea that his grandfather had a first wife. You know,
I think that's part of the reason why the family kind of did the dates the way they did, because I think if they would have said earlier, I think they would have looked into it more, maybe, or something. I don't know. I feel like they're trying to hide it is to just kind of to ignore it, actually.
Yeah, or just they just didn't talk about it, and nobody was asking. You know, nobody's asking the questions. You know, until somebody starts doing their family history, and then they're like, "Oh, why didn't I ask those questions?" Right? We all have that where we.
Well, how many of you have had this experience where you've talked to some of your family members and you know, and they're just exasperated because I've told you everything I know. Well, then you do the research and you find something and you go to that person and you ask about it. They're like, well, yeah, I knew about that. And you're like, well, why didn't you tell me that?
Exactly.
You know, because it's like it's not that important to them in some odd way or something.
Exactly. I think that the most frustrating thing that I ever discovered after talking to people was my step grandfather. I kept asking him about his family because I wanted to help him find his family. I don't know anything. I don't have anything. And then he died and we found a lockbox and he had his father's World War I discharge papers.
Isn't that funny?
Are you kidding me? How many times did I ask you? Oh, I don't have anything. So to him, I guess maybe he forgot they were in there. I mean, I don't know, but don't ever believe I don't have anything.
No. My grandmother, who claimed that she was orphaned and all that, one of the things I found in my dad's things that he had gotten from her is she had a picture of her brother and she'd written Samuel Dunaway, my brother, on the back of it. And it had been in the family things forever and nobody looked like, but wait, if you were orphaned, who is this teenage boy that's your brother?
Exactly. So the moral of the story is don't believe any of your family members.
Don't ever believe them because they don't remember. They're just making it up as they go. Oh gosh, let's move on to Terry Crews, football player. Sorry.
Yeah, and as well, Dan too, as Michiganders, I mean, when someone tells you they grew up in Flint, you know it.
Yeah, you know a sad story's coming.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of happy stories come out of Flint, you know.
Well, there are some, but there's a lot of people that struggled. Yeah.
Right. And I think his experience on the show, I'd like to know what happened when he took the book that they made him and showed it to his father, because he and his father have not had the best relationship. But then he learned the story of his paternal grandfather, and that helped him see, oh, maybe that's why my dad was the way he was. And I mean, his gosh, it was so sad because
It was.
his grandfather ended up going to jail a couple of times, once for abandoning his family, and the other was for trying to rob a liquor store, and he was put in jail for that. And what I think the saddest part of that, they put him on a chain gang, and those boys would, on the school bus, they would drive right by the prison to go to school that their dad was in. That's got to affect you. And
they went and visited him in prison.
Yeah, and they went and visited him, but you know, every day they're off to school and they're like, well, there's where my dad is. You know, that just, yeah, it's just terrible. And so, and then he died really early too. So he died like he was 38.
38.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he was.
It's very important. It's very important for us to look at how these events affected our ancestors. It's like my grandfather. His father died when he was 9 in a horrible elevator accident at his work, where he was he worked at some kind of a plant in Parkersburg, West Virginia. That's a packing plant of some kind. But he lived like 3 weeks after. This was in 1914. Well, yeah. Or 1919 anyway. And so my grandfather was 9 years old when his dad died. And then his mother, they lived in West Virginia. His mother picked them up and went to Akron, Ohio. I don't know why yet. And she opened up a boarding home and things. And so you think about at 9, you know, and my grandfather, I never met my grandfather. He died when I was 3. He's one of those people I really want to meet one day. But he seemed, my father seemed to suggest that he was a pretty hard man. That he drank. He was an alcoholic. He worked every day of his life, but he was an alcoholic. They never owned a car. His philosophy was that if people want to see me, they'll come see me, or they'll come pick me up, take them to their house, and take me back home. You know, so you know, and
so these things do affect.
I think they do.
Right.
They really do, and I think we should look closer at how these things affect, like Terry Crews.
Exactly. Dan?
Well, I think too, like even the story that Terry shared from his own growing up years with the pizza, like that, that got me. I mean, because I work with kids that are in those types of situations, right? Where, you know, but he had such a good attitude about it, because he saw that this is what life could be like. And he just said, this is what I want. This is what a happy family looks like, when his parents would, you know, and I mean, he joked like,
when his dad would win the gambling that week and come home and bring pizza, and his mom was happy. She was,
gambling's a sin unless you win, you know, then it's all right. You know,
I know people like that.
Right, pulling out wads of cash from his coat pocket. Then just them sitting around the table and having pizza, like I could just see that, and just like just my heart ached for I don't know if he was ever little Terry Crews, but for Terry Crews, moderately sized Terry Crews, you know, but but you see that sort of generational thing, and just see him kind of make that decision of, that's what I want in my life, and I'm going to work very hard. And knowing about him outside of this show, he's had his own personal challenges that he's worked very hard to overcome, and work with his wife on, and try to keep his family together.
Just going down the line, like we talked about, those things just going down the line.
But it was really touching to me too, Dan, because I think in the same circumstances, people might have taken that little scene and not then said, that's what I want, and come up with other ways they're going to try to get it. I mean, he basically, and he was grabbing onto the happiness.
Yeah.
I mean, I found that super, super touching.
That was, the whole with both of them, it was so, I just was emotional the whole time. It was very touching for both of them.
He said, and Terry Crews said something that made me think about how I look at my ancestors, and even my family members that I knew. A lot of my ancestors you didn't know, but your family members, you know. He said that his mom and dad were doing what they knew to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he didn't excuse it. He didn't say that it was okay.
Yeah.
He just said that they were doing the best that they could with what they knew and what they knew to do. And I think
Absolutely.
sometimes we judge our ancestors a little too harshly in some aspects,
Right.
because I think they are only doing what they know to do,
Right.
whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
A lot of our ancestors did wrong things, didn't
Mhm.
have very perfect lives, but they only
Right.
did what they knew to do.
Right. And what he said about his dad, because they said his dad was abusive, but he said hurt people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so, and he said, I'm going to take this book and I'm going to show him all this
And I wonder
information.
how that went.
Yeah, I hope it went well. I hope it helped them to kind of
Yeah.
find some peace and maybe
Mhm.
connect a little bit.
Yeah.
I also like the story of his grandmother that he remembered, and then they found her in a census. Was 1870? Yeah, it was 1870 census, living with her grandfather, and they couldn't find her parents anywhere, so they're not sure what happened to them. But in that household, with her grandfather was, or maybe it was her father, and then he had grandchildren with him. I can't remember now what the generations were, but there was a bunch of people in that household.
There was.
And what I loved about that story, that showing that census and all those people in the household, he was 64, and they said that he was a farm laborer. And they went, wait a second. Like Shelley would say, so what? What does this tell? What are the questions now we get from this document? Well, how on earth was he making enough money to take care of all these people? And so they did, more research. They were digging into other things, and it turned out that he was an entrepreneur, that he had, they found an actual ad in the newspaper where he was selling sod. He was doing yard work. He was selling
everything he could to take care of those people in that house.
Yeah.
Selling dogs. Yeah, that was the weird. I was like, oh, the other stuff makes sense.
Well, maybe they were fighting dogs or something. Do you know what I mean? That was my thought, was maybe they were. Yeah. So,
and Terry Crews was so excited
to
see the entrepreneurship, because Terry Crews talked about his life and how after he got out of the NFL and football, and he said, we were broke. He said we were broke.
Yeah.
And that they were digging in the couches for change. And I can tell you, I can remember when my husband and I were young, we were digging to coat pockets to look for money for diapers for the baby. So I can relate to that. But he talked about that, and they talked about getting that $8, $48, and $8. And he said, I'll never be poor again. Meaning he was going to pay attention and take care of how he handled his finances, which he has.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So very interesting.
Well, then they went back another generation, and they found his enslaved ancestors. Fanny, and what was it, George? I can't remember now. Or I'm sorry, I can't remember what the name was. But they were split up, as happened. Her owner, her enslaver, had died, and so they took her and her kids, and they moved some of the kids other places, and that was touching too, because he says, I've got children, and I can't even imagine somebody coming in and taking my children.
Well, who could imagine that?
Oh, I know. Someplace else where I knew, but you know what, that was how they lived, in fear of that all the time. And her husband was on another plantation, and then somehow, by a miracle, she and some of the children that stayed with her were rented out to the plantation where her husband was. I mean, that is just, and he goes, that's a movie, because they were all then together in that, in the census. Maybe it was Edward, the grandfather was there. I can't remember. I get the names and the generations confused sometimes, but they all ended up back together, which doesn't happen very often. So you've got, grandparents and their children, and they're all back in that household together. And he was so fun. That is a movie. And I'm thinking, I wonder if he's going to write the script and make that into a movie.
Coming in 2023.
Exactly.
One of the things that
they were torn apart.
I know.
Together.
One of the things that I wrote down about Terry Crews and
Uh-huh.
Tony Danza, about them, that
Mhm.
made me think about using that for my ancestors is when Dr. Gates was introducing them, how Dr. Gates kind of talks about them and where they came
Yeah.
from and all that kind of stuff. And he made the comment that they both had reinvented themselves.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
thought, how many of our ancestors have done the same thing?
Mhm.
And have we
Sure.
found that? Have we
Yeah.
found where it's like, and I'm thinking along the lines of like some of my family members that I knew
Mhm. Mhm.
that were, sweet and wonderful when they got older, but what were they like when they were younger?
When they were younger. Absolutely.
That's why I
Absolutely.
encourage genealogists a lot of times to really research their entire lives. I think sometimes
Yes.
genealogists start at marriage and come forward,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
they had a whole nother life
Yeah,
before
exactly.
that,
Exactly. Yeah.
and it may not be that you can find a tremendous amount of records, but I'd still say that,
Right.
'cause a lot of people change after marriage, or they change as they get
Yeah.
older.
That's true. That is very
And
true.
so,
And
so
it's
I'm-
like
I'm-
In my own parents, I saw like an evolution of values and with
Mhm.
changing times and things like that. They weren't the same people when they died at 67 as they had been when they
Mhm.
married.
Right.
So we
Yeah.
used to call my dad's mom, we called her Grandma Shoot because she would say shoot all the time. And my dad would remind us that if they would have said that if it was more accurate to when he was a child, it would have been grandma, another word than shoot. So her language sort of mellowed over time.
Mellow. That's cute.
Yeah.
That's cute.
That's
I
right.
love that. Right.
And then he'd
And
yell at her, or she'd yell at him.
She'd-
It's like, shut up, David.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
Don't
And
tell
I
those
think-
kids this. Yeah.
Sorry, Dan. I think
no,
it's really, really important as we watch the show. I know we didn't get to see the documents, and that was a little frustrating, but to go beyond those vital statistics that everybody jumps in and wants to know: birth, marriage, death. And then they want to go on and go back another generation and go back another generation. Stop and find out about their lives. Look at those newspapers and see what you can find. If they hadn't looked at the newspaper, they would have never known that his grandmother owned that business. They would have just, oh, well, we know he was born here and he died here and he married here, So that's how you find out all these things. Figure out why were they doing that? What was going on? Why, when they found that newspaper report, was that hotel and saloon? Why were people arrested? Why were the people down inside a trap door? And you find out that by looking at the law and figure out why would they do that? Why didn't they have everybody out in the open? So check the laws, see what was going on. And that helps you understand them, right? So
that's right. And then go and see if the building still exists.
Yes.
And if it does, go stand there and get your picture taken.
Exactly.
Go down into the trap door.
Exactly.
The hookers, I mean, just
and wear the clothes of that generation while you're in the trap door.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do it, do a deep dive.
Do
That's
a deep dive and do it
put on the
right.
hoop skirts and then try to go into the tunnel.
I just think our ancestors, I think that, if you're going to be a genealogist and you're going to research your ancestors, they deserve more than just penciling in their birth, marriage, and death dates. I think they just deserve more than that. Just like you said, Cheri, a lot of them will just do that, move to the next, move to the next. But you know what? Spend some time. Create the full life of your ancestors. Because I don't know, the longer I do genealogy, the longer I feel like that my ancestors have a story to tell, and I'm going to tell it, and hopefully it'll be remembered.
Yeah, good or bad. And how many people, I get this question all the time when they find out I'm a genealogist, they'll say, well, how far back have you gone?
Yeah.
Instead of what kind of cool stories do you have,
Yeah.
And
or tell me about your ancestors. That's what I ask. I say, well, tell me about your ancestors.
Exactly.
I want to go back as far. I want to go back like everybody else. But I think the longer I've done it, and I've done it now for 32 years, the more I'm slowing down and paying attention to each and every ancestor.
Yeah, finding those stories. So yes, Dan.
And I think that that desire, that push to go back generations
Mhm.
really invites sloppy genealogy, right? Because we think, well,
Yes.
their last name is Smiths. How many Smiths could there have been in New York City? You know, and then we just, of course it's them. And we just, and you
Yes.
make
Yeah.
illogical assumptions about
Exactly.
ancestors, or, well, their last name
Exactly.
was King. They must have been royalty. So of course their dad must have been Henry VIII, you know, and then you just, you know, or you have grandmothers that were born, you know, but, you know, after their grandchildren were born, and just this
Yeah.
just
I know.
craven madness to go back generation after generation after
Yes.
generation,
Yep.
instead of staying where the records are and
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
getting to know them, instead of just
Right.
blowing through and having this mad dash to
Mhm.
Adam and Eve, or, you know, wherever, to Noah. I mean, it just, who cares, right? I mean, just
Right.
get to know the ones that are close.
Absolutely. I just had somebody well, about a year ago change my grandmother's information. My paternal grandmother does not have, or did not have, her father's name because her parents were not married when she was born. And so she is listed, her name, her middle name, and her mother's maiden name. So somebody decided they were going to change that because their little comment said, obviously she must have had her mother's maiden name as her middle name, and somebody forgot to add. they didn't look at a record, but they changed her name and put her dad's name as her surname. That was not her surname. There is not one single record that anybody will ever be able to find that has her listed with that surname, because she never had it. But they were jumping to conclusions. They were
Yeah.
not looking at records. And so I finally just put very nicely, and I changed it back. And then I wrote why this was her name. And then I haven't had trouble with it again because I explained it. But, and then the person got a hold of me and said, oops, I'm sorry. So, but that's the kind of thing that we can do so quickly if we don't pay attention and we don't look at records and we just assume. And so, yeah. People are connecting to Adam, but they got the wrong. they got the wrong lines going up. Yeah. So does anybody have anything else? This was another good teaching episode, I think. And like we said, it would have been nice if they'd have showed some more of those records, because I like for people who are interested in genealogy and searching for their ancestors to see what kind of records are out there, instead of just saying, well, we found this and we found this. I like it when they show the examples so that people know what they look like. And it would be nice for them. They did mention one Georgia Archives where they got, I think, a marriage record. I think that's where they found the court records too for his grandfather's cases where he went to court. So they did mention an archives, and but I think it would be really nice. But maybe they feel like it's just supposed to be entertainment TV, and nobody wants to.
I think that's the case.
They probably have researched, you know, their audience and
Maybe.
how deeply, you know, their roots go.
Right.
I do really like that they will take you back in time for a specific place. And tell you, oh, this is what happened in this time.
Yeah.
And they do give you, because otherwise, if you don't research us, I have no Italian ancestors. It's not something I know a lot about. So I think it's really interesting when they put you in that world for, even if it's just a couple of minutes.
Sure. Well, and that gets you thinking, oh, I need to check on that about my ancestors. What was going on? Did mine come back and forth and I didn't know? You know, those types of things. So it just, you can learn. And we've talked about this so many times, is we can learn so much by just watching and seeing. And so I think we've talked about before, wouldn't it be fun to have show notes that we can go and look at?
Yeah.
And they can show us the documents, they can show us, you know, where they found them and all that, kind of like just a list of the research that was done for these celebrities. I think that would be a really cool, if somebody out there want to create a blog that's like this with the researchers.
Yeah.
Get the information. I think that would be a really, really cool thing. But because I know some people will watch and they go, well, I have no idea how I'd even get those records, you know, so. And it would be nice if they could say, you know, these these are readily available. You can get them here or there, but I guess they don't want to be supporting different companies or anything either. So, but anyway.
That's true. That's true.
And this is one of the few episodes where they did not do their DNA.
They didn't do their DNA. I was waiting for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was waiting to see who they were related to.
I don't know how they decide when to do DNA and when not to do DNA, but they didn't do it on this one.
I was really hoping they would, because especially when they said Tony Danza's family came from Sicily, because Sicily is an area with a lot of endogamy. And I was really interested in how are they gonna deal with that? How are they gonna analyze that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was a little.
Yeah. It was a good episode. They're all,
It was.
they're all good if you come into it. I know some people will say, well, I'm not going to watch that episode because that doesn't deal with me, or I'm not going to watch this one because it doesn't deal with me. Watch them all and see what you can learn to do to research your ancestors, get some hints and tips. And I think we just say that every time is that's
We
what
do.
we do. We really just need, and if we're really lucky, one of the episodes will show us how to research our own ancestors because they're in the place where we have them, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but anyway, does anybody else have anything they want to add about this episode?
Good.
No. All righty. Thank you guys for being here. This has been a lot of fun. It was a good emotional, like we said, episode that really showed that we can't believe family stories. So that's what I would have called it. But maybe it just didn't look good on the look better to call it fighters. So with that, thanks everybody for joining us. We'd love for you to put your comments and the things you learned and how you felt about this episode, either in the blog post or in the chat and YouTube, the comment section. So we will see you next time on GenFriends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.